The stars outside the observation window blinked with eerie indifference. Captain James Adler stared at them, his knuckles white as he gripped the cold metal railing. The hum of the engines, once a familiar comfort, now felt hollow. The Cerberus was the last ship left in Earth's fleet, and the Galactic Empire's forces were closing in. "Captain, they've locked on!" came the voice of Lieutenant Elena Voss, sharp and tight, her eyes flicking between the array of flickering screens before her. The tension in the bridge was palpable, suffocating. Adler didn't flinch. His heart was a steady drumbeat in his chest, but his mind raced. "How much time do we have?" Voss' face twitched. She didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, and he could feel the weight of her hesitation. Finally, she exhaled sharply. 3 minutes, maybe less. Their fleet's closing fast. His jaw tightened. There was no more time for strategy. Earth's last hope was a single ship, surrounded by the massive warships of an empire that had crushed entire civilizations without mercy. His crew, a handful of weary soldiers, had managed to disable the Empire's sensors with a covert EMP strike, just enough to get a few minutes of radio silence before the final battle. And yet, despite the advantage, Adler knew the truth. This was a battle humanity couldn't win. "We should surrender." The voice of General Thorne, leader of the Galactic Empire's invading fleet, crackled over the comms. His voice was calm, almost bored. "We both know this is over, Captain. Earth's resistance is futile. Surrender now, and we may spare the lives of your people." Voss's hand clenched into a fist. She shot Adler a look of disbelief. "Is he serious?" Adler's gaze shifted to her, but his expression remained unwavering. "He is," he replied, his voice steady, though the words felt like shards of ice. His eyes lingered on the comm screen, where the image of the Empire's massive flagship loomed, dark and impenetrable. Its size alone was enough to make any sane person bow their head in defeat. But Adler was no ordinary man. And Earth was no ordinary planet. "We won't surrender," Adler muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the weight of his ancestors, the weight of human ambition. It had always been a battle of survival, but the stakes had never been this high. The last few days had been a blur of frantic preparations. The alliance of Earth's defenders had managed to hold the Empire at bay for months, but the sheer firepower of the invaders was overwhelming. One by one, Earth's cities fell. One by one, its heroes were defeated. And now, only Adler and his small crew remained. Not today, he thought. He wasn't going to let the story of humanity end like this. Not with their backs to the wall, not on their knees. "Captain," Voss said, her voice tight. "We have one option left." Adler's eyes flicked to her. "What is it?" Voss hesitated, biting her lip. "There's an old weapons cache beneath Earth's surface." "No," Adler interrupted. "We don't have the time." "No, listen," Voss continued, voice growing more urgent. "It's humanity's last weapon, the last of Earth's old defenses. The ones we've been ignoring for centuries. The anti-aircraft guns, if we can get to them, we might stand a chance." Adler's gaze sharpened. The old weapons. The forgotten weapons, a relic from Earth's Cold War era. They had been decommissioned long ago, seen as obsolete, primitive, and barely effective against modern technology. But if they were still operational... "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. Voss nodded. "Positive. But we need to move fast. The Empire won't wait for us to dig up old junk." Adler looked out the window again. The Empire's fleet loomed closer, their weapons charging. In less than 3 minutes, the Cerberus would be destroyed, and humanity would be wiped from the stars. A pathetic end to a species that had once ruled the Earth. But the fire of resistance still burned inside him. "Prepare to launch," Adler ordered, his voice filled with resolve. "Set course for Earth's surface. We're going in." Voss gave a sharp nod, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Aye, Captain." Adler turned and made his way toward the command chair. He settled into it, gripping the armrests tightly as the Cerberus shuddered into motion. The ship was slow, sluggish, and antique compared to the sleek, devastating ships of the Empire. It would be a miracle if they made it. But in that moment, Captain James Adler realized something. The fight was far from over. For all of humanity's flaws, its greatest strength had always been its stubborn refusal to give up, to bend the knee, to die quietly. They were not a species that laid down without a fight. And today, he would lead them in that fight. The hum of the engines grew louder, a familiar sound now tinged with the adrenaline of impending battle. The countdown had begun. They were going to take Earth back. One shot at a time. The descent was abrupt. The Cerberus shuddered violently as it broke through Earth's atmosphere, a deep tremor vibrating through the hull. Captain Adler's teeth clenched. Every warning light on the control panel screamed at them. The ship wasn't built for re-entry. "We're gonna make it, right?" Voss's voice crackled with tension as she gripped the navigation console, her eyes darting between screens. Her fingers hovered over the emergency controls, ready to yank the lever if the ship's integrity faltered. "No time for if," Adler said, his voice steady despite the rising pressure in his chest. His eyes stayed focused on the viewport, watching as the blue and green planet rushed up to meet them. "We hit the ground, we make it to that facility, and we either win or die trying." Voss took a deep breath, forcing the anxiety out of her chest. "Aye, Captain." They plummeted lower, the ship's engines howling in protest. The old Earth ship wasn't designed for such maneuvers, its engines groaning under the strain. The final push was close, and their chances were razor-thin. "Captain," came the voice of Sergeant Alan Reyes from the comms, steady and calm despite the chaos. "We've got incoming. Empire interceptors. They've already launched." Adler's grip tightened on the armrests of his chair. He could see them now, dots on the edge of the viewport, small but closing in fast. The Empire's ships, sleek and deadly, cut through the atmosphere like sharks through water. "Get us lower," he barked to Voss. "Give them something to think about." She didn't need further instruction. With a practiced movement, she flipped a switch, slamming the ship into a steep dive toward the ground. The craft jolted, and Adler's stomach lurched as they broke through the final layer of atmosphere, the distant horizon now nothing but smog and dust. "We've got 5 minutes before they get in firing range," Reyes reported. His voice was a steady anchor in the storm. "If we don't land soon, we're cooked." The ship's hull groaned again. "We'll land," Adler said, his voice like steel. He knew the ground was closer than ever now, but the true challenge lay ahead, getting to that weapons cache before the Empire finished its job. The ship's thrusters flared as they slammed into the rugged terrain. Dust and debris kicked up in every direction as the Cerberus touched down with an ear-rattling thud. The ship's emergency lights flickered. The low hum of the engines finally ceased, replaced by the heavy silence of the dusty wilderness. Adler's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. Time was running out. He shot up from his chair, moving swiftly to the cargo hold. The crew was already preparing. Private Anna Duval, the youngest of the team, was loading her weapon, her eyes darting around with the unease of someone who didn't fully understand what was about to happen. "Duval," Adler called, his tone a sharp command. "Yes, sir." She snapped to attention, her face pale. "You'll follow Reyes and Voss. I need you on the ground first, securing our perimeter. Move quickly. We have no idea how much time we have." Her nod was quick, but Adler saw the fear behind her eyes. It wasn't the first time the crew had faced impossible odds, but this was different. Earth was slipping through their fingers, and their mission was humanity's last hope. Turning, Adler addressed the rest of the crew. "Listen up. The weapons cache is buried beneath a military base on the outskirts. It's one of the last remaining facilities that the Empire hasn't fully overrun. We don't have much time before they figure out where we've landed." Voss looked him square in the eye, her voice unwavering. "We'll get there. And we'll make it work." He believed her. But the nagging doubt at the back of his mind was a reminder that they couldn't afford mistakes. Not this time. They filed out of the Cerberus one by one, the dry wind whipping dust into their faces. Adler surveyed the bleak landscape, his mind sharp, scanning for any signs of Empire forces. The barren horizon stretched endlessly, the once thriving cities of Earth now turned to ash under the Empire's relentless march. The only thing left in the world now was survival. Behind them, the Cerberus was already powering down, cloaking itself in the shadows. But the reality of their situation gnawed at him. He was no longer captain of a ship, but a man on the ground with a handful of soldiers, trying to stop an empire that had already conquered half the galaxy. Voss and Reyes moved ahead, their boots crunching the gravel beneath them, weapons raised, eyes scanning the barren desert for any sign of movement. Duval kept close to Adler, her hands trembling as she adjusted the scope on her rifle. "I know it looks bleak," Adler said, his voice softer now. "But we've made it this far. We'll make it to the cache, and we'll fight till we've got nothing left." Duval nodded, swallowing hard. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I'm not afraid of them, sir. I'm afraid of letting everyone down." Adler placed a hand on her shoulder. "None of us are. But if we die standing. Now let's move." The group set off, their footsteps falling in sync, the distant rumble of Empire's ships overhead a constant reminder that Earth's fate was no longer in their hands. It was in their feet, in their fire, in the weapon they carried with them. And that weapon, hidden below the earth, might just be enough to turn the tide. The wind howled through the desolate canyon, the air thick with the scent of dry earth and the faint metallic tang of distant combat. A low rumble echoed from the sky. Empire's ships still patrolled, their sleek forms cutting through the atmosphere like predators hunting prey. Adler's boots crunched against the gravel as he surveyed the horizon. The ancient facility wasn't far now, hidden beneath a mound of rock and debris that barely marked the spot where Earth's last defense stood. The Empire had no idea what was buried there, but they would soon learn the hard way. His team moved in silence behind him, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of trouble. Voss, ever the calm one, walked with precision, her rifle held loosely at her side but ready for action. Reyes, more impulsive but no less deadly, trailed a few steps behind, his hand constantly moving to check the pulse of the tactical comms. "Status?" Adler's voice was low, his eyes still fixed on the canyon walls ahead. Reyes adjusted the comms device strapped to his chest, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No signs of enemy movement on the sensors yet, but that doesn't mean they're not here. We need to hurry." Duval, the youngest of the team, was barely keeping up. She was a good soldier, no doubt, but the weight of the mission was wearing on her. The uncertainty hung over them like a storm cloud, thick and oppressive. "We'll get there," Adler said, his voice firm. "We're not stopping until we're inside that base." Voss gave him a quick glance but said nothing. She was the practical one. The one who always had a plan. "Adler," Voss said, her voice breaking the stillness. "We need to talk about Duval." Adler's gaze flicked to the young soldier, who was stumbling slightly as she trudged along. "What about her?" "She's not ready for this," Voss replied, her voice quieter now, almost regretful. "We're pushing her too hard." Adler exhaled sharply, his gaze never leaving the path ahead. "She'll be fine. She's got the heart for it." "I hope you're right," Voss said, but there was an edge to her voice, one that Adler didn't miss. They didn't have time for doubts. The Empire was out there, somewhere, and if they didn't reach the weapons cache soon, Earth's fate would be sealed. The jagged cliffs of the canyon gave way to a small clearing. At its center stood a metal door, half buried in the earth, but the markings on its surface were unmistakable. Earth's last line of defense, hidden from the Empire for decades. Adler motioned for the team to halt. They had arrived. "Race," Adler said, his tone sharp. "See if you can override that door. We're running out of time." Reyes stepped forward, his fingers flying over the control pad, his eyes scanning the input display. His brow furrowed as he worked, but a moment later, the door groaned open with a soft hiss. The air from inside was stale, old, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. "We're in, Reyes said, his voice steady. But Adler could tell from the slight tremor in his hands that something didn't sit right. "Let's go," Adler commanded, moving toward the entrance. The air inside was thick with the scent of rust and age. The long, abandoned corridors stretched out before them, dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. Dust settled in every corner, untouched by the Empire's forces. It felt like a tomb, but Adler knew better. It was a weapon. This place was designed for one purpose, Adler said as he walked briskly down the hall, his voice echoing in the silence. To keep the Empire out. What's in here exactly? Duval asked, her voice low but full of curiosity. The last of Earth's fighting chance, Adler replied grimly. We've got everything we need to hit the Empire hard. If we're lucky, we might just get a few surprises. Voss shot him a sharp look. We're running on luck, Adler. And luck doesn't win wars. He met her gaze with a grim smile. Then we make our own. They reached the central chamber. Inside, a large vault-like door loomed. The hum of the facility's ancient power systems filled the room, and a low vibration thrummed beneath their feet. Reyes moved quickly, scanning the area for any signs of traps or sensors. This is it, Reyes muttered, pulling a small device from his pack. The device buzzed to life in his hands. I can override the final lock. The seconds stretched on, each one a weight pressing down on their shoulders. Adler could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins. They were close, so close, but the Empire was also closing in. Time was slipping away. I don't like this, Duval said, her voice tight. This place feels wrong. We don't have time for feelings, Voss snapped. We do the job or Earth's done. Just as Reyes hit the final command on the override device, a loud bang echoed from the entrance they had just come through. The rumbling sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, unmistakable. Empire, Adler muttered, his heart sinking. The Cerberus was cloaked, but they weren't the only ones who had noticed the disturbance. Get the door open now, Adler barked. Reyes didn't hesitate. The vault door slid open with a metallic screech, revealing rows upon rows of weapons, from futuristic rifles to long-forgotten artillery pieces. But none of it mattered. The sound of Empire boots grew louder. Their time was up. The screeching of metal echoed down the narrow hall, mingling with the rapid footfalls of enemy soldiers. Adler's heart raced, adrenaline sharpening his senses. They were here. The Empire was closing in faster than he had anticipated. Shit, Reyes muttered, his voice tight with urgency. He turned toward the heavy vault door, his hands moving like lightning to activate the override. We've got seconds. This better work. Voss took up a defensive position by the doorframe, her rifle trained on the corridor they had just entered. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked over her surroundings. If that door doesn't open soon, we're going to be in trouble. Adler was already moving, stepping toward the nearest crate filled with ancient weaponry. He threw the lid open, revealing a stack of assault rifles and grenades, relics of a bygone era. His fingers brushed against the weapons, searching for something that might give them an edge. We need to make it out with something, he muttered under his breath. Duval, the youngest of the team, shifted nervously. She had been quiet since they entered the facility, her face pale with the strain of the mission. Adler, she said, her voice shaky. What if they're already? Not yet, Adler cut her off. We're not dead yet. The sounds of Empire soldiers grew louder, their voices distorted through the thick walls. The whine of energy shields and mechanical boots against the floor rang out, signaling their approach. Voss glanced over at Adler, her lips pressed into a thin line. They've found us. No way around it. We either fight or die here. Adler's mind raced, calculating their options. The door had to open. They couldn't be caught exposed. Reyes, hurry! I'm working as fast as I can, Reyes hissed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his fingers dancing over the override controls. The chamber was silent but for the hum of machinery and the distant thud of boots. Every second felt like an eternity. Adler's breath quickened. They didn't have time to waste. His grip tightened around the butt of an ancient grenade launcher. Everyone on me, he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. Prepare for a fight. Voss nodded sharply, her rifle raised. Duval, still unsure, followed suit, her hands shaking as she gripped her weapon. Reyes was the only one who seemed unaffected, focused entirely on the override device. A flash of light suddenly flickered from the corridor. Adler spun on his heel, his heart pounding. They're almost here! The vault door let out a loud mechanical groan, and then, silence. Adler's chest tightened. What the hell? Reyes stepped back, his face pale. It's not responding. The system's locked down. Voss swore under her breath. We're trapped. No way out now. The first Empire soldiers rounded the corner, their black armor gleaming under the dim lights. There were at least 5 of them, heavy blasters in hand, moving with precision. The sight of them was like a cold wave washing over Adler. It was real now, the moment of truth. The lead soldier raised his rifle, his expression hidden behind a helmet that could have belonged to any number of faceless invaders. Surrender, human, A distorted voice boomed from the speaker embedded in his armor. You are outnumbered. The Empire offers you mercy, Mercy. The word twisted Adler's insides. We don't need your mercy, he growled, his hand tightening around the grenade launcher. We'll give you a reason to regret this. The enemy soldier's rifle discharged a stream of plasma, the shot narrowly missing Adler's shoulder. He ducked behind cover instinctively, the air around him sizzling with the heat of the blast. His eyes darted to Voss, who was already firing back with deadly precision. The first soldier dropped, a spray of blood and smoke marking his fall. But more were coming. I told you, surrender, the voice from the second soldier barked. The blast from his rifle tore through the air, forcing Reyes to dive behind a stack of crates. The team's position was now compromised, and Adler knew they had seconds before the Empire launched a full assault. Voss, cover the rear! Adler ordered, his voice a calm contrast to the chaos. Reyes, Duval, get to that door, now! The 2 soldiers nodded and sprinted toward the door controls, their feet pounding against the concrete floor. Reyes's fingers fumbled with the panel, his pulse racing. He was almost there. Adler pressed his back against the nearest wall, watching the enemy's movements. He had to buy them time. The last thing he wanted was to lose his team now, after everything they had endured to get here. The Empire was ruthless, but humans had a fire in them that could never be extinguished. The moment the last of the soldiers entered the corridor, Adler made his move. He hurled a grenade over the edge, a quick, calculated throw. Time seemed to slow as the device sailed through the air. The explosion was deafening, a flash of light that temporarily blinded everyone in the vicinity. When the dust settled, the hallway was littered with the remnants of the Empire's soldiers. Adler's heart raced, but he didn't celebrate. The door was open. No! He barked. Duval had already cracked the panel, and with a final click, the vault door hissed open. Inside lay their salvation, or their doom.